Thank you, and good evening. Welcome to Caltech's Beckman Auditorium for another in the Ernest C. Watson Lecture Series. My name is Paul Jennings. I'm chairman of Caltech's Division of Engineering and Applied Science, and it's my pleasure to introduce this evening's speaker, Dr. Robert J. McEliece, who is professor of electrical engineering at Caltech. Bob received both his BS and PhD degrees here at Caltech, finishing his graduate work in 1967. After that, he worked several years at JPL and then was a professor of mathematics at Illinois. And then in 1982, he joined the faculty here at Caltech as professor of electrical engineering. Bob is a very prominent and active research worker in communication theory and is especially well known for applications of discrete mathematics to various problems in this field. He's chosen for his topic tonight a question from Coding and Theory: Safety in Numbers, Protecting Data Mathemagically. Bob McEliece.
Thanks, Paul, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and boys and girls, for coming tonight. It's an honor to be invited to give a Watson lecture, and it's a pleasure to be able to tell such a large audience something about what I do for a living. You know, they say that people with emotional problems become psychiatrists, and sick children grow up to be doctors, and people with bad teeth become dentists. I can identify with that because when I was little, I made a lot of careless errors. I couldn't read my own handwriting. I made spelling mistakes. When I multiplied, I forgot to carry. I tried to learn chess, but I always overlooked my opponent's best move. It was awful. Right, Mom? Anyway, between my junior and my senior years here at Caltech, I got a summer job at JPL, and that summer, I found out that you could use mathematics to correct errors automatically. For some reason, this struck a chord with me. And I wanted to learn all about the subject. And as it's turned out, the theory of error correction has become a big part of my life's work. I still make a lot of errors, but now I get paid for correcting them. And paid very well, thank you. I shouldn't have said that. My boss is in the audience, and it's raise time. Anyway, tonight I'd like to tell you all something about the theory of error correction, why I think it's a lot of fun, and how it plays a big part in the design of today's communication and digital storage systems. So let's begin. I'd like to start by convincing you all that you're already pretty good at correcting errors, in English at least. So we're going to have a quiz. You get to participate. I'm going to show you a slide, and on this slide is a 5-letter English word, something you all know, except that I've erased one of the 5 letters. I replaced it with a question mark, actually. So you're supposed to just look at it, use the force, and figure out what the word is. Okay. I'm going to put it up. As soon as you know what the word is, yell it out. An intelligent audience, a remarkable audience. Okay, here's a slightly harder one. A 5-letter word in which there's an error, not an erasure. I've changed one of the letters to another letter. No question mark this time. Ready? Go. What a delightful audience. It's a pleasure to talk to you. Well, maybe that wasn't too hard either, but congratulate yourselves anyway, because you're a lot better at error and erasure correction than a computer is. In fact, nobody quite knows how humans correct errors in English. But as a rule, correcting an erasure is about half as hard as correcting an error. Let me give you 5 more words to try now to show you it's not always that easy, okay? Now, there are going to be 5 words, 5-letter words on the screen, and in each word, I've changed one of the letters to another letter. You're supposed to tell me what the words are, all right? Don't all speak at once, but here they are. I'm waiting. All right, stop. If I left it up much longer, you'd all be getting out pieces of paper and you'd stop paying attention to me. Well, if you lose the thread a little later, you can work, if the lights will permit, you can work on it, but bear with me a little longer, please. Anyway, the point is that error correction in English is possible, even if it's not always so easy. Error correction in English is possible because there's a subtle and complex pattern to the way words and sentences are constructed in English. Everybody knows that Q is always followed by U. That's a pattern. And even if the pattern is partially destroyed by erasing the U, for example, the word is always still recognizable. Another pattern, a lot of words end with vowel, consonant, silent E. Think of date, stalactite, remote, or cute, or even trade. Even if I change the silent E to F or something like that, you'll probably still be able to see the pattern and tell what the word is. However, in these 5 words, you can still work on them for a little while longer, the pattern's not so strong, and that's why you're having trouble. Okay, stop. Anyway, the patterns help you correct the errors, but sometimes the patterns in English aren't good enough. I'm going to show you another 5-letter word with 1 erased letter, and you're supposed to tell me what the word was. I love it. Okay. Okay. I think you're all right, but there's no right answer to this word because there's at least 5 possible answers. Maybe there's more, I don't know. The problem is that these 5 words are somehow too close to each other. They differ from each other in only 1 letter, and if I erase the second letter, you lose the word. You can probably think of lots of other examples, but here's the problem that I haven't been able to solve. Can you think of a 5 or more letter word such that if you erase one of the letters, there are 6 or more ways to complete it? Tell me after the lecture if you can think of one. I think it's a good problem. That was with an erasure. With errors, instead of erasures, the problem can get a lot more interesting and more complex. So I'm going to show you yet one more 5-letter word in which I've in which I've changed one of the letters to another letter. You're supposed to tell me what the word was originally. I'm waiting. Okay, well, here's my solution. Glade is already a word. That's the first problem. But even more interesting is that I can change any one of the 5 letters in the word glade to another letter and make another word. In fact, one of the students I showed this to earlier pointed out there's even one more. There's glaze. So the glade is pretty sensitive to possible typos. In fact, a long time ago in 1879, Lewis Carroll, who liked word games as much as anybody, invented one called doublets based on the fact that many pairs of words differ in only 1 letter. You've probably seen this maybe under another name. For example, here's how Lewis Carroll changed black into white. The game is that you're allowed to change 1 letter each time, except that the new word that you get has to be a word in the dictionary. It's pretty hard to change black into white, so I'll give you an easy one. If you lose the thread a little later, you might try turning lead into gold. Too easy. Okay. Anyway, English has quite a lot of built-in error-correcting ability because of its natural patterns, but it wasn't designed systematically to correct errors, and as we've seen, sometimes, not often, but sometimes, changing just 1 letter in a word can dramatically change its meaning. Of course, it's just this wonderful ambiguity that lets us play word games, commit horrible puns, write complex poetry, and invent pseudo-words like mathemagically. And I don't advocate changing the English language. But suppose we did want to design a new language, a very precise language for absolutely reliable communication of important information, air traffic control, military commands, deep space communication. You can think of some other examples. It turns out we could do a lot better than English. We wouldn't have any more fun with word games, no clever poetry, but a much better ability to recover from errors. So let me tell you how an error-proof language can be designed tonight. The first thing to know, if you want to design a new and improved language for communicating reliably despite errors, is that you don't have to use a 26-letter alphabet. It's like Wilbur and Orville designing the airplane. They looked at the birds for ideas, but they didn't have to copy slavishly. Birds have wings, that's a good idea. The wings flap, that's not such a good idea. Okay. Airplanes have things that spin around on their nose, they don't have feathers. The idea is we can look at nature, the English language in this case, for ideas. We have to add some patterns and so forth, but we shouldn't be forced to copy English so much. And in particular, as I said, an alphabet of only 2 letters is sufficient. And as you may know, many communication and data storage systems use a 2-letter alphabet. That's what a digital communication system is really, a 2-letter system. The letters in these two-letter alphabets are usually called, as you may know, 0 and 1, but the names are arbitrary, and any other pair of names would do as well. Yes and no, or up and down, or on and off, or high and low, or trivial and obvious, which are the Caltech students' favorite pair of words. However, it's not trivial or obvious that with an alphabet of only 2 letters, you can communicate any possible message. In fact, there's a famous episode of Star Trek whose plot hinges on just this point. The episode is called The Menagerie, and it tells the story of the unfortunate Captain Christopher Pike. He's been exposed to a near-fatal dose of deadly delta rays, and he's now confined to a sort of a tin can. He's able to see and hear and think normally, but he can't speak. However, his tin can has a light on the front that Captain Pike can use to communicate. 1 flash for yes and 2 for no. He has a 2-letter alphabet. I'm going to show you a scene from this episode, and in this scene, Captain Kirk has been trying for hours to figure out what's wrong with poor Captain Pike, who only has a 2-letter alphabet. He seems to be upset about something. He's joined in this clip by Dr. McCoy, who, as usual, is not much help. But he gets very, very philosophical about it. The star date is 3012.4. That's Captain Pike. Tin can.
Keeps blinking no. No to what? We've tried questioning him. He's almost agitated himself into a coma.
How long will he live?
As long as any of us. Blast medicine, anyway. We've learned to tie into every human organ in the body except one. The brain. The brain is what life is all about. Now, that man can think any thought that we can. Love, hope, dream as much as we can. But he can't reach out, and no one can reach in.
Keeps blinking no.
No to what? They could question him for days, weeks, before they stumble on the right thing.
Bones. Could this have anything to do with Spock?
Beep. Yes, it has something to do with Spock. What's wrong with those guys? His mind isn't really trapped in there. They should study digital communications. There's many ways they could find out what's wrong. For example, they could go to Captain Pike and say, Captain Pike, can you hear me? Beep. Captain Pike, think of a sentence that describes your predicament. Have you thought of the sentence? Beep. Is the first letter in this sentence A? Beep, beep. Okay, so it takes 10 or 15 minutes, but then they'll find out what the problem is. Spock is planning to kidnap him and take him to the forbidden planet Talos 4. Everybody knew that. In fact, any conversation that could be carried out between ordinary folks could also be carried out with Captain Pike with a little patience and ingenuity. If you've ever played 20 Questions, you already know this. However, even the logical Mr. Spock may not have known that even if Captain Pike's little light malfunctioned occasionally, by flashing yes when he meant no, or vice versa, it would still have been possible to communicate reliably with him. This fact is very far from trivial and obvious, but it's true, as I'll now demonstrate with the help of my lovely and talented assistant, Cynthia Stewart. Where are you, Cynthia? Okay. Here's the deal. Cynthia has, she has 2 stacks of cards, one for each letter A through H. She's going to go into the audience and have a volunteer pick out one of these letters. I'm not going to look. I'm going to take my glasses off on her system, and I'm going to guess what the letter is, I hope. How are we doing? Okay. Tell me when the letter is in place. Okay. You can see it, but I can't. I'm not going to peek. All right. Now she has another stack of cards, 9 cards in fact, and 7 of them are green cards marked truth. And 2 of them are red, I hope there's only 2 red cards, marked lie. Okay, she's going to ask for another volunteer from the audience who will come up on stage. Don't be shy. Here we go. Never seen this guy before in my life. Nice looking fellow, though. Okay. Now, I'm also not going to look. In fact, I'm going to be working pretty hard here in a minute. So he's going to hand her the cards one at a time in any order he likes. But if the card is green, I'm going to ask Cynthia a question. She has to tell the truth. If the card is red, Cynthia is going to lie to me. And I'm going to try to figure out what the letter is. Are we ready? I hope so. Okay. Is the letter A, B, C, or D?
No.
Is the letter A, B, E, or F?
No.
No. I need complete silence for this. Okay. Is the letter A, E, F, or G?
No.
Is the letter H, G, or E?
No.
Is the letter H, C, or G? At the symposium's closing banquet, Shannon was, of course, seated at the head table. About halfway through the banquet, Lee Davison, who was at that time the head of the electrical engineering department at the University of Maryland, did what we had all secretly wanted to do all week, and he asked Shannon for his autograph. That opened the floodgates. For the rest of the meal, there was a long line of autograph hounds with PhDs, including me, including the busboy, who didn't have a PhD, waiting for Shannon's autograph. If you know how large scientific egos tend to be, you'll know how really astonishing this scene was. It was almost as if Newton had showed up at a physics conference. Okay, enough hagiography. What did Shannon do exactly? Claude Shannon has a great feeling for generalities. He saw that any communication process, when I'm talking to you, or you're talking on the telephone, when you're watching TV, when the Voyager spacecraft is sending photographs of Neptune to Earth, anything. Any communication process can be modeled by this simple picture that you see. The information that must be communicated is transmitted over a channel. The air that separates you and me, or a telephone wire, or all the complicated stuff between the television studio and your house, or the 2.8 billion miles of empty space between Neptune and Earth. These are all examples of communication channels. All communication channels are to a greater or lesser degree noisy, which means that what comes out of the channel isn't always what goes in. On many channels, the noise is intolerable. Think of a bad phone connection or trying to talk to somebody near the airport when a 747 flies over. Until Shannon, everybody thought that the only way to communicate reliably over an unreliable channel was to physically make the channel more reliable by spending money or something. You could yell to overcome the 747 noise, or more generally build a more powerful transmitter, or build a more sensitive receiver, and so on. In 1948, however, Shannon showed that this wasn't necessary at all. It is in fact possible to communicate perfectly reliably over essentially any channel, however noisy it may be. I already showed you a simple example of this. Cynthia was able to communicate me one letter of the alphabet over a channel that caused some lies or errors. Incidentally, although people had played 20 questions for centuries, it was only after Shannon's work that the game of 20 questions with lies was seriously studied. In fact, the trick I showed you first appeared in a 1964 PhD thesis of one of Shannon's students at MIT. His name is Elwin Berlekamp, and he's a pretty well-known professor at Berkeley now himself. Anyway, here's how Shannon said you could communicate reliably over an unreliable channel. The idea is to send the data over the channel as before, but before the data is sent over the channel, it's supposed to be processed by a man-made device called an encoder. The job of the encoder is to take the data and use it to calculate something called redundancy. The redundancy is then combined with the data